Today we have another quick and easy tutorial for you. It'll really ramp up your renders and make them look more lifelike. It's something that's really easy to do, but a lot of people tend to not use it. And I'm not exactly sure why, but maybe it's just they don't know what they're doing with it. Today, we're gonna do something called depth of field. And what that basically does is it changes, like if you're using a real camera, you've got something called an aperture. And when you change the size of the aperture, if it gets smaller, you get more stuff in focus. And if it gets bigger, if you have a wider aperture, you've got less stuff in focus. So that'll make sense in just a minute. But they've got something in Blender called depth of field that you can use for your cameras. And it's right here. You've got the option checked. Basically what that allows you to do is mimic what real life cameras do. So what I usually do first is I'll get the cursor to be at the world origin. So the cursor to world origin, Shift A, and I add an empty. And what an empty is just basically a point or something that won't render. So I like to use these like crosshair empties. Let's go into this view. I want to put the focus on his face. Put it right there. And that looks about where I want my focus. Now all I have to do is go to the camera. I enable depth of field. Usually this is unchecked. Go to depth of field, focus on object, and we'll look at this empty. All right, let's see what that did for us. So it looks like it's not doing anything quite yet. But if we change to what's called the f-stop, it will make things blur out or become more in focus depending on the size. The smaller the number, the more out of focus things will be. So it looks like this is our magic number here, 0.4. If we want to change where it is, I'm just going to select that, hit G, Y, and I'll move it closer to the camera or further from the camera. You can see things start to blur out as the focus changes. Avoid making the number too small. For some reason, when you make the number really small, this f-stop number, it has a really hard time computing that. It's just a lot of... It'll take more time the smaller the number you make after a certain point. Like 0.4 shouldn't be too bad. But we just go ahead and render this. And this is how it looks, I guess. There we go. That's good. Anyway, this has been a quick tutorial just to show how to do some depth of field. Let's maybe put that to 0.6 just to see what that looks like when it's rendered. Alright, well that doesn't look too bad. I've got motion blur enabled right now, so I should turn that off and we can look at it. Alright. Because that's not a still image that I'm working with. So there you go. Now, because he's holding still, you can see that there's no more motion blur and the depth of field is still working. So thank you for joining me. Hope you apply this in all the renders that you plan to do in the future. I mean, if you don't, hopefully there's a stylistic thing you're doing without it. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. Hope you stick around for another video.